Hey everyone, welcome to the StoryMaking Show. Today I am excited to be with Allison Ewing. Allison is a professional wedding photographer and a certified yoga teacher. Allison, thanks for being with me on the StoryMaking Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Oh, me too. And today we're going to talk a little bit about self-care. And I think I'm just going to let you take over because I want to hear more of your story and just learn from you about self-care. So please take it away.
Thank you so much. And this is also like something that I love talking about. So I will try to not go off on any tangents. Because that it's something, again, when you're passionate about something, as I'm sure your listeners can relate to, it's so easy to just get tied up in the word vomit of it all. But I'll try to keep it on point. But yeah, so I'm Allison Ewing, and like you mentioned, I'm a registered yoga teacher and also a wedding and lifestyle photographer here in Northeast Ohio, a very cold Northeast Ohio, I should add. But so for me, back in 2011, I confided in a really close friend that I was having what I now know to be anxiety and panic attacks. And I confided in her, and we talked about it. And I said, I don't know what is going on. I don't know what to do. And she said, you should give this thing called yoga a try. I hear it's really good for stress relief. And I was like, I am desperate to feel better. So I tried anything. So I went to my very first yoga class back in 2011, and it has changed my life. So from the moment I walked in and after I left that first class, I felt that relief that I was so desperately needing in my life. And I made the declaration that when I got home and I was talking to my now husband Jason, I said, if I can help just one person feel that same relief that I felt after that first yoga class, then I want to be a yoga teacher. And so for the past 7 years, I have been teaching in local yoga studios in and throughout Northeast Ohio. And it's truly one of my biggest joys. And then also, being a small business owner, I feel like I can just relate so much to the struggles and just the things that the small business owners go through, and things that we don't talk about necessarily, because it's not like the sexy topics, if you will, like mental health and self-care and whatnot. But I think it's really important. So
That's fantastic. And I thank you so much for sharing some of your own story. I think everyone can relate to that at times where you're just like overwhelmed and just you don't know what to do next. And you find something that brings you some relief, some joy, some energy, and you just start feeling better. What does it look like for you, like keeping this good, healthy habit going?
yeah,
Versus like, hey, I did it once and then life happened and now I'm back where I was, not feeling as good.
it's such a good question. For me, self-care is all about routines. And when I find that when I write down my self-care, then that is something that I'm actually going to follow through and do. It's almost like I'm making this commitment to myself, and so I'm going to follow through on that. So for me, that's really important. But also recognizing that, again, for me, and I'm sure for others, truly self-care can also change. It doesn't necessarily, just because something is working for you right now doesn't mean that it's always going to work for you. And I like to think of it's self-care is not a one size fits all. It can and should be different for everyone. We can go down that road as well. But it's also really important to recognize that your self-care can look different in a different season of life. So whatever season of life you're in, whether you're, just starting out in your business, or you've been doing this for 10 years, maybe, you're a new parent, or, you're experiencing grief, or, there's just these seasons, it's definitely the seasonality of it. And then also the seasons of the year too. So for me, my self-care changes based on the actual season. one thing that I also really love doing is going outside and taking walks. I'm not doing that right now in Ohio.
You'd
So
freeze.
again, yeah, I mean, I definitely could, but I'm a freeze baby anyway. Like, I'm not joking. I'm literally sitting here with a heated blanket on my lap. So like, I'm always cold. So that's, again, so it's just kind of recognizing what your self-care looks like, and then also realizing that it can change over time, and that is perfectly fine.
That's great. And there's so much honesty in what you just said, Allison. You're like, I'm a cold baby. I have my heated blanket
Yes.
here. I am not going to be the person, most likely, like it wouldn't be very, very common. It wouldn't be something we would bank on, to go for a walk every day, no matter what the weather. But I bet you're doing something, even little, every day in a form of self-care to kind of keep you in the right mental health space, the right physical health space, right? You're still doing little things because you built these into your routines.
Absolutely. Yes. And so for me, yoga, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing an hour of yoga a day, because that would be not fair for me to tell you guys. That would be a lie. But even just 10, 20 minutes to move my body is what I need in order to feel really good about myself. I also do really love meditation. And I think we were talking before this too. Something else that I really do is truly like looking at my business, what is working, what is not working, and then realizing what I can say no to, because to me, that is also a form of setting a boundary, which is also a version of self-care.
I think that's really good. And it's so easy to be a people pleaser. And as you have a business, it can be like, the customer is always right, can be the mindset. And it's like, yes, anything, whatever pleases other people. And talk about draining.
Absolutely.
That's just unsustainable, and really will lead to some being very tired in every way possible.
It's just the fastest way to burnout, in my opinion. And I always say this, and I will continue to say this: if we as business owners, if we are not at our best, then there is no way that our business can be at its best either.
Such a no-brainer, but
Right.
as we're in the middle of things, as you're
Yeah.
checking email and you're on social and you're, sending out invoices and doing taxes and all these not glamorous things,
Right.
it can be easy to lose sight of that. And
When Yep.
that's so big, so big.
Yeah, when you're in the thick of it, you're not sitting there thinking like, "Oh, have I had a drink of water today? Have I eaten my lunch yet?" Like, and again, it's just it might sound so silly, but those are also things that you can do to yourself for your self-care. That again, those things can just get pushed to the back burner, because yes, as business owners, we love our businesses, I would hope. I mean, I love my business, but it really can overwhelm you at some times. And it's so important to kind of just take that little step back and do something that is just going to be so good for you, and then will in turn help you be a better business owner.
I can't help but think of some friends of mine who have small businesses around town, and I know they've been in very, very busy, hectic seasons. And like
Mhm.
I'll notice and I'll be like, "Ooh, have you taken a break?" I want to
Yeah.
say that, but it feels kind of rude to say because they're so busy and they're in the midst of it. And I feel like that outside perspective, though, you can see things in others that,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
hard to do it yourself. It's hard to just say, okay, let's put the magnifying glass or the mirror back on
Mhm.
me
Yes.
and to say, ooh, press pause, re, you know, blocking out all the things going on. And like personally, I find myself feeling a little guilty. I don't know if that's something you've ever struggled with, Allison, where it's
Yeah.
like, things are going on and things are crazy. You need the self-care, but it's like it almost feels selfish, I guess is the way I view it in my mind when I'm not looking at it appropriately. How
Yeah.
do you get past that?
Yeah. Well, side note, give me your friends' names. I'll check in on them because that's
Thank
fine.
you.
I'll do that for you. You know,
Thank you.
like, are
Outside
you
perspective, right?
exactly? They'll be like, who is this girl checking in on me? But again, it's something that I do love. I do love to chat about. Um, but I think getting over that hurdle of thinking that self-care is selfish. And for me, I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs over the years, and the thing we have in common is that they all tell me that they're tired, that they're on the edge of burnout, and that they're not focusing on themselves or their family or their friend. They're just it's the business is becoming all consuming. And I just think that it really is so important to just go back to, like, what can I, even if it's just one thing, what can I do in my day, something that will bring me joy, which to me that is my definition of self-care. I'll read the actual definition, just for everyone listening. So the self-care definition is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. And there are actually 6 different types of self-care, and if you're interested, I would definitely encourage your listeners to just go and Google it.
Yeah,
It'll pop right up.
interesting.
But I like to think of self-care as just something that I can do that will just bring me joy and fill me up. And something else I like to say too is that I can have the best SEO strategy, the best marketing strategy, client experience in the world. But if I'm not right, if I'm not showing up as myself, my 100% authentic self to my clients, then I am doing my business a disservice and myself a disservice. So that's how I get over that feeling of like, oh, I have photos to edit, but I'm outside taking a walk right now. Well, that's okay because the 10-20 minutes that it takes me to go on a walk around the block is what I need in order to be my best self and get back to the task at hand.
That's so good. That 10-20 minutes can
Yeah.
change your whole day.
Right. And that's something else too, when I go and I'm like preaching about all the self-care. I think a common misconception is the audience will think, "Oh my gosh, she wants me to spend 90 minutes on myself a day, and that's just not going to happen." No, 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 no. I mean, if you do have 90 minutes, then amazing. That is awesome. You do you. But just 10-20 minutes really can make such a difference. And even if you just give it a try for a week, I guarantee you that you're going to be blown away.
On that very point of that
Mhm.
10 to 20 minutes, and I agree with you, but I have to ask the question for someone
Yes.
who is just like thinking about it. They
Mhm.
haven't like started really self-care. I
Yeah.
think it's really, really easy to kind of just not be proactive about it, but actually be reactive about it. And it becomes like, oh, it's self-care. I'm just going to sit on the couch and, watch
Yeah.
Netflix or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, it could be self-care, but if you're not
Yeah.
intentional about it, it could be more vegging out and you're just kind of sitting there. Um, I think that
I
one thing
yeah.
you gotten at, it's like you have to be intentional. It's like you're like, hey, is this bringing me joy?
Yes.
Is kind of one of the criteria. I know you have many more. But someone like, okay, I want to get healthier. I want to move more. I want to get
Mhm.
exercising. I want to, start some new healthy habits. I think there's such a burden to like this getting started. It's like
Yes.
intimidating. So what would you recommend for someone like just getting started with, real intentional self-care?
It's a great question. And, I mean, I could take this so many different ways. So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, where do I want to take this? But I think first and foremost, saying, this is something I learned in the year 2020. Not to everyone's like, oh gosh, we're going there. We're going back in time, to the year that shall not be named. But what I learned in 2020 is that, you know, you can go back to basic self-care, which for me and for others can be just making sure you're getting enough water,
Mm,
making sure you're getting enough sleep, and
mhm.
making sure you're eating balanced meals. That can just be like your introductory level
Yeah,
self-care that everyone really needs, and but sometimes we just don't focus on. So I think that that is something that you can really intentionally do and add into your routine that isn't going to necessarily feel like, oh my gosh, like it's a burden, or
right.
and again, just being like mindful that you're trying to incorporate those things into your schedule. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and especially the water one. I'm guilty of having lots and lots of coffee and not enough water, and I'm like,
Yes.
It's decaf. Yeah, it
Yeah.
counts." And I think that
What?
just
Coffee
having
is made with
water,
water. Yeah.
right? So many people would say it's the same as water, but it's not.
Right. It's not.
And just drinking, some fresh water and, mixing in some veggies, that kind of thing, and
Exactly.
trying those basic things. And I love that you mentioned sleep because
Yeah.
I actually had that on my planner as like one of my to-dos was take a
Yeah.
nap. I put
I
that on
love
there and I
that.
was like, I felt a little guilty, Allison. I did. I was like,
Yes.
you slacker. That was my first inner thought. You slacker. What's wrong? And I was like, hold the phone here. I don't think it's actually a slacking thing. I think I'm trying to catch up from,
Yeah.
you know,
You're just
uh,
you're you're just listening to what your body needs, and I think that's so important, and
yeah,
something that, again, we can get in our own heads and think, "Oh my gosh, I'm being lazy," or,
right.
I have all these things to do." But again, if you're just, like, listening to what you actually need, you're just going to be such a better version of yourself, and I love that. I think that's great. And something
I'm not saying I've been consistent with that one because,
Right.
things do come up, but boy, it's good to have some positive, simple goals and,
Mhm.
naps can be I think most adults need more naps. That's just a fact, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I know. And you also you mentioned something too about sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, and whether or not
Mhm.
that could be considered vegging out or self care. And I think it's a really interesting point to make, because again, over the last, I would say, 5 years, I feel like the term self care has been thrown out a lot, and it is almost always associated with going to get like a mani pedi or
Mhm.
a
Massage.
massage,
Yep.
which, I mean, sign me up. I would love that. I mean, that's great. And yes, that can actually be a version of self care. But again, it's not the end all be all. And I want people to realize and recognize, like I mentioned, there are the 6 different types of self care. And so, truly finding what makes you feel like the best version of you is so critical in figuring out what your self-care looks like. And maybe it is taking 30 minutes to sit down and watch Netflix in the evening. I mean, that can
Oh,
be a part
yeah.
of it,
Yeah.
for
No,
sure.
I
um
totally agree. I totally agree. I was talking more the hours on end, not even enjoying it kind of
right.
like it's on and then you get the prompt of shame. I think they took away the prompt of
Oh.
shame, but they used to have the prompt of shame. Are you still
Oh
watching?
yeah. Yeah, they still, it's at least on my end, it's still there, and I'm like, yes, I'm still watching, of course I am.
Um, that's so funny. The biggest thing though, like you said, kind of starting with the basics. Now, is it so important where you're like, "Hey, I am really just drawing these boundaries in my life," and you've
Mhm.
kind of structured around it? Is that kind of your approach, Allison?
It is because, and again, I know, depending on, as a small business owner, yes, I am a photographer, so I'm gonna just like really quickly. I don't want to like only speak to photography because I know your listeners are so diverse in what their small business is. But for me, what I have found is that being a wedding photographer which is, again, one of my true joys. I love it so much. But I realized that on the day prior to a wedding, I go through this extensive checklist of getting all of my gear ready, all of the things that I need, my water, my snacks. Like, I mean, you need it all. But I wasn't actually doing anything to prepare me for my wedding
Mm.
days, which arguably, like, I'm also just as important, if not more so, than the
You're the
gear.
one
And
pointing the camera.
I
Yeah.
mean, and
Yeah.
it's like I laugh about it, but if I really sit down and think about it, I'm like, if I need to show up as my best self on my couple's wedding days, I owe them that. And so, whatever I can do in order to show up, like I said, as my best self, I will do. So, for me, I have just set that boundary that I do not work on the day prior to a wedding. Yes, I'll check email, of course, like, check social. That's different. But I am not shooting photos, like a session on the day before a wedding. I am maybe doing a light yoga class, maybe some foam rolling. I'm pre-hydrating.
Mhm.
And those, but it's, again, it's just like being really mindful about these things that I can do in order to make myself show up in the best way possible for my couples, because they deserve that. They deserve the best version of me. And
Yeah.
if I'm out shooting a session the day
Uh-uh.
prior and then coming in and being like, oh, I'm tired or whatever,
You're a
like,
little groggy by default. You're human.
right,
Right? You'll have to
exactly.
be. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I also, to that point, I also don't work the day after a wedding. I call it the wedding photographer's hangover, even though I
That's
haven't
fair.
had a drop of alcohol.
That's fair.
Um, when I'm on my feet for 10 hours, 10 plus hours a
Yeah.
day, and carrying, I mean, cameras are heavy. Let's just be honest.
Right.
And also just mentally being on all
Uh-huh.
day. I just need that day to compress. And I used to feel so guilty for that. Like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
I could be taking another session and making more money and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And
Yeah. What are you doing,
you know,
Allison? Right?
exactly. And I really had to overcome that thought and that hurdle, because because I used to, I used to work at a digital marketing agency. And so while that was my full-time job, I was just growing my photography business on the side. So I only had the weekends to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
So then I would do multiple sessions on a Sunday after a wedding. And not that my clients really knew that I wasn't feeling the best, but I knew it,
Mhm.
and that just, yeah, like you said, I'm human. We're all human. We deserve rest. We deserve breaks. And if that means just, putting those little boundaries in place, like, hey, I don't work on these 2 days, then okay, that works for me. And again, not saying that works,
Right.
would
Right.
work for everyone, but that's just how I go about self-care.
Two comments. You're
Yeah.
really talking about energy.
Mhm.
Physical and mental
Yeah.
energy are the big ones that are right
Uh-huh.
there attached to the work that you're doing. And
Yes.
also, you're saying, like, you do you. Allison does Allison's work. Jim does
Yes.
Jim's work. And not comparing, because I think the comparing, if you're thinking, "Ooh, I could be," if you go on Instagram or something and you look and say, "Ooh, this person shot 5 weddings this weekend and I did
Mhm.
1," or
Yep.
something like that, or, the writer who's written 500 words and then they read that somebody else written 5,000 words.
Yep.
Um, it's kind of almost that, the comparison moment where it's like, "Ooh, they're way here, I'm way down low," and I feel like that's part of the component here too with the self-care, because you said a couple times, 100% fully authentic you.
Yep.
And there's not much room for comparison with that one, Allison.
Yeah, and I part of me just wants to be like, comparison is a thief of joy. I know that's like a quote, but
But we
I
need to
mean,
hear it. I appreciate you
yeah,
mentioning that because I think we
yeah,
need to hear it.
it's so true. And I'm gonna say something.
Go ahead, fire,
um,
please. I was this whole time was trying to get this.
I know. I'm just going to go for it. So if you find yourself comparing to people on the internet, which we all do, I do all the time, she's better than me, he's doing more than me, you name it, again, we're human, we think this way, that's how we're programmed to think, it's fine. It's also totally fine to not follow those people. And that for me is also a version of self-care. If I am going and if I am looking at someone's work and it's causing me to spiral in a place where I don't want to go, and I'm questioning my worth, and am I enough? Am I doing enough? That take a break, right? take a couple steps back, because I really think that is so important as small business owners, as creators, as writers, those things. You are on your own journey. And I just think it's so important to focus only on you. So if you need to take a little step back on social media for a little bit, or again, the mute button is, I'm not saying unfollow every single person, but if you need to mute those people that are making you feel less than, then I think you need to do that for yourself, like for your mental health. And it's, I went there.
You're preaching to me, and I'm loving it, because I need the affirmation, honestly, because I think we all do it. And even though you might not consider yourself to be a writer, Allison, if you've ever thought of having a book, you'd be like, ooh, this photographer did this. Ooh, and it's like our attention spans can just jump around, and it's overwhelming. And then especially if you know some of these people and you're friends with them or acquaintances, then it's like, we didn't used to know what everyone was doing.
Very true. And that's the thing, I can still be a cheerleader for fellow photographers, but I don't have to necessarily be following their every move. And I am so big into the community over competition. And I love lifting other people up, and I really feel like if we all do, if she's doing well, then I'm doing well, we're all doing well. And we can really raise that tide. But again, if it's causing your mental health to take it to a place where you don't really need it to be going, then taking that time away from social media, it can be so beneficial.
Now, as we wrap up here, Allison, I have to ask you this question that is a little hard. I'll give you that disclaimer.
Yeah.
What about just being lazy versus having self-care? Because I think that's one of the challenges. Like, I even was struggling with this today. Honestly, I was trying to work on some story stuff this morning, and I was just not feeling it. And I was like, ooh, why are you being lazy, Jim? I was literally at that moment, and I was like, And what would you say? Because I think that's pretty common, where we're not sure if it's like, ooh, am I on YouTube because it's self-care, or is it procrastination?
This is a great question. So I'm going to first and foremost just do this disclaimer. I'm sure it should be implied, but just in case it's not, I am not a mental health professional. So this is by no means me diagnosing anyone or whatnot. But it's mainly just me going off of like my personal experiences and just what I know that is true for me. I think there is definitely days where you can just be lazy. There are days where it's like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it today, and we all have our days, and that is a-okay. Go back to, again, are you drinking water? Are you sleeping enough? Are you eating 3 balanced meals a day? Awesome.
Right.
But I think there's also a more like reflection that we need to do if we start to notice that this is becoming a pattern. And if it is something that you're continually starting to see and question, like, is this laziness or is this something else? And so maybe doing a check in with yourself
Yeah.
and just really seeing if maybe, you know, if all the self-care and the self-help techniques that you have been doing to feel good and to feel like yourself are no longer working, then that just might be a sign that you may just need to seek professional help. And
Mhm.
I am going to be first, you know, so transparent with all of you. Back when I was going through the panic disorder and the anxiety, uh, yes, yoga was a huge form of self-care and it made me feel better, but I also went to therapy, and I will say it over and over again, going to therapy was and still is the best thing I could have done for myself and for my business.
Yeah.
So I'm a big firm believer of
That's
going
awesome.
and chatting with someone. So again, just like I said, checking in with yourself and really doing that little reflection,
Yeah.
um, is going to be really important, because self-care can only do so much if you're
Yeah.
experiencing something mental health wise.
Yeah. Yeah, and and in all honesty, if you're really struggling with mental health, you're not going to even enjoy some of the things you normally enjoy. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's also something to look out for. If, you know, there are things that you normally do that that used to bring you joy, happiness, and you feel really good doing it, and they no longer are bringing you that joy. Again, it just might be time to think
Yeah.
about, yeah.
Talking to someone and
Hmm.
trying new things, they all kind of
Yeah,
go hand in hand in that regard.
for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, Allison, if someone wants to get in touch with you, I will link to your website in the comments as well. But is there any best way that they can contact you about self-care, or by chance they want an amazing wedding photographer or lifestyle photographer?
I appreciate that.
Allison.
So my Instagram handle is Allison Ewing Photography, and or email is also a great way. I'm sure you can link that
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Can you
You
tell I'm
bet.
not a podcaster? I'm like, can you just
You're
like
good.
link that or
Yeah, no
something?
problem. You're great.
But I would welcome any, DM or email. I really do just love chatting all things self-care and helping others maybe even figure out, like, what does their version of self-care look like. And yeah, please reach out. Would love to chat more.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks so much again for being a guest on the Story Making Show.
Yeah.
I was thrilled to have you on here, and I know your words will inspire many others. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me, Jim. I really appreciate it.